The day my parents drove away and left me in a sunburned parking lot with nothing but a soda, I still believed they'd come back. They didn't. But what happened after made sure the world would never forget me again. They say family never turns their back on you. But that's not true. That's a lie I lived through with every breath in my lungs. I was 10 years old, standing outside our front door, rain soaking through my thin pajamas. The door was locked. My fingers numb for knocking, pleading, hoping. And on the other side of the window, my mother. She just pulled the curtains shut like I was some random girl begging on the street. Once I walked 5.5 miles under the blazing 96-degree sun, shoes falling apart, feet bleeding because I missed the bus. I was 12. They told me it would build character. If you're imagining a warm home with laughter and bedtime stories, I'm sorry, that wasn't my life. My name's Elena, and what I had wasn't a family. It was a cold, unyielding boot camp disguised as a household. My parents, Mark and Diane, raised me with a mission to make me believe that love was something reserved for other people. Not me, not under their roof. Rules, silence, and the loss of innocence when I was small. I thought all families were like that. I really did. That every dinner table was cold and quiet. That dads only opened their mouths to give commands. That moms only looked up from their plates to shout. I figured every kid got a timer set when they cried, 3 minutes, then shut it down. Strength was mandatory. Weakness was punishable. In our house, if you wanted someone to notice your pain, you had to hold your breath until your face turned purple. And even then, it was a gamble. My dad, Mark, used to be a soldier. My mom, Diane, a former teacher who quit the moment I was born. But not to raise me. No, she had a new mission. To mold me into someone who needed no one, ever. They called me their first experiment. Told me if I failed, I'd have no one to blame but myself. I still hear those words sometimes, like a ghost whispering over my shoulder. One winter night in Minnesota, I was just 9. I forgot to take out the trash. A small slip, right? Not to them. My dad opened the back door without a word and dragged me outside barefoot. No coat, no shoes, into the freezing cold. It was 33 degrees. Stand here, he said, until you understand responsibility. Then the door shut. I stood there for nearly an hour, trembling, crying silently. And when my mom finally let me in, she didn't say sorry. Just, maybe next time, you'll think twice before being useless. Survival training disguised as parenting. I was 11 the first time I missed the school bus. Just overslept. It happens, right? But in my house, it was a crime. My mom refused to drive me. My dad didn't even look up from his coffee. You made the mistake, he said coldly. You deal with it. So I walked 6 miles, alone. My backpack weighed almost 20 pounds, and the Florida sun turned my clothes into a second skin soaked with sweat. By the time I got to school, almost 2 hours late, my feet were raw and my shoulders ached. The teacher called home. My mother picked up. And you know what she said? She needs to learn not to depend on others. Then she hung up, just like that. When I told my classmates, they didn't believe me. Some laughed. A few called it strict parenting. But it wasn't strict. It was cold. Everything in that house was designed to harden me. Every conversation was a trap, every mistake a lesson. I had to learn how to read the air, every twitch in my mother's lip, every pause in my father's step. One wrong word, one wrong breath, and suddenly I was being taught again. Forget to fold a blanket, get lectured for an hour, spill some milk. That's a 10-minute rant about waste. Laugh too loud, they'd snap. You sound weak. Ask a question at the wrong time, grounded. I used to dream of one thing, a hug. Just once, I wanted them to look me in the eye and say, "We're sorry, Elena. You didn't deserve this." But they never did. They never even hesitated. They weren't raising a daughter. They were building a machine. And slowly, day by day, I stopped being a little girl. The day they left me like I was nothing, I thought I'd gotten used to their way of loving me. Or rather, not loving me. But I was wrong. Because when I was 15, they gave me a final lesson. And this one, it broke something inside me that would never heal the same again. We were driving through Florida on our way to visit relatives. The air was thick with heat and tension. I sat in the back seat, my headphones in, half asleep from the suffocating sun baking the car. Mark and Diane, my parents, were bickering about something dumb. They always did. They never talked unless it was to blame or bark orders. Their voices were just noise by that point. Background static I'd learned to tune out. We stopped in a forgotten little town called Crest Hill, a place that felt like time had abandoned it. The paint on the train station peeled like dried skin, and the sun pressed down like punishment. Mark turned and looked at me, his eyes blank. "Go give me a soda." I blinked, pulled out one earbud. "What?" Diane didn't even look at me, just smirked and said, "He's thirsty. I want a bottle of water too." "Chop chop, sweetheart." There was a strange chill behind her smile. Something in me hesitated, but I still got out of the car. The heat hit me like an oven door left open. I walked to the vending machine, stuffed in the last $10 bill I had, and waited as it groaned and spit out the drinks. When I turned back, the car was gone. I froze, looked around. Nothing. Just a wide, empty lot under a sky too bright to cry beneath. No cars. No people. Just the sound of cicadas buzzing like sorrow. Then my phone vibrated. A message. Just 4 lines. Let's see how long it takes you to get home. This is a test. Don't call Aunt Julia. Don't disappoint us. My heart dropped into a black hole. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a joke. They really left me. No suitcase. No worit. No map. Just a soda and a bottle of water in my shaking hands. The call that broke the rules and saved my life. I stood there, rooted to the pavement, the cold soda sweating in my hand, now useless. My breath grew short, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the summer heat. Maybe they just moved the car, I told myself. Maybe they want to get gas. Maybe something. But my phone buzzed again. Don't make a mess of things. Handle it yourself. That was the moment I stopped making excuses for them. They left me. On purpose. I was 16. No license. No cash. No clue where I even was. Rage swirled under my skin, fighting the rising panic. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I crushed the plastic water bottle in my hand, took one deep breath, and started walking. I had about $1.37 in change, a phone with 27% battery, and a crumpled map left over from last year's camping trip still stuffed in the bottom of my backpack. I found an old man behind the counter inside the station, his eyes heavy-lidded and tired. Is there a bus stop nearby? I asked, barely holding myself together. He squinted out the window. 2 miles that way, but nothing runs until tomorrow. I nodded, didn't say another word, just turned and walked. My legs felt like wood. Every step on the burning pavement made my knees threaten to buckle. But I didn't stop. I did the one thing they told me never to do. I called Aunt Julia, the only person in our family who ever looked at me with kindness, not criticism. Elena, she answered by the second ring. Sweetheart, are you okay? They left me. I whispered, and for the first time in my life, my voice cracked. There was silence. Then, stay where you are, she said. I'm coming to get you. The first hug that didn't hurt, I sat down on the side of that empty road, legs tucked beneath me, head resting against a rusted signpost. The Florida heat hadn't let up, not for a second. The air was thick, hot, and buzzing with the cry of cicadas. But I just waited. For the first time in my life, I had no plan. An hour passed, maybe more. Then I heard tires screeching against dry gravel. I looked up, and there it was, Aunt Julia's old SUV pulling into the lot like it was on fire. Before I could stand, she was out of the car. Elena. She ran to me, dropped her knees, and pulled me into a hug so fierce, it knocked the breath out of my lungs. But it didn't hurt. It healed. My God, my poor girl. Her voice trembled, her arms like armor around me. What the hell did they do to you? I didn't answer. There weren't words strong enough to explain it. But I knew one thing as clear as daylight. I was never going back. 3 days later, I was standing in the middle of Aunt Julia's living room in Gainesville. The air smelled like cinnamon and old books, and I stared at the only suitcase in the room, one she bought for me. Because I had nothing, just a ragged backpack and a bruised spirit. What do I want to do next? She asked, handing me a mug of peppermint tea. I looked out the window. The sky was gray, but the rain hadn't come. Just like me, cloudy but holding steady. I'm not going back, I whispered. She nodded. Good. You don't have to. But if you stay, it's a clean slate. No more lessons. No Mark. No Diane. Just you. For the first time, I felt it. Not fear. Choice. Even if the road ahead was broken and steep, at least this time, it was mine. Rock bottom was my starting line. Starting over sounds poetic in books. But in real life, it's a lot less glamorous. I got a job waitressing at a tiny cafe near the University of Florida. Opened at 5 a.m., which meant I was up by 4:15. The pay was small. The shifts were long. But the owner smiled when he talked to me. Not once did he call me weak. Not once did he say I disappointed him. That alone made the job feel like gold. After work, I'd come back to Aunt Julia's little house and study for the GED. My fingers ached from carrying trays all morning, but I held that pencil like it was a lifeline. I wasn't doing it to impress anyone, not to prove myself to Mark or Diane. I was doing it for me, because for the first time, I wanted to be proud of myself. Aunt Julia wasn't rich, but she had the kind of wealth I'd never seen before, love. She drove me to my exams, waited in the car for hours, made dinner when I came home exhausted. She even bought me an SAT prep book. I knew it cost nearly a week's worth of groceries. But she just smiled and said, it's an investment in someone worth believing in. A year later, I got the letter. University of Central Florida. Partial scholarship. I read it 3 times before the words even made sense. I stood there in the kitchen, letter trembling in my hand, my legs numb. Aunt Julia walked in and wrapped her arm around me. You're about to live a whole new life, Elena, she said softly. And this time, you get to write the story. 4 years later, I graduated with honors in urban development. And when I crossed the stage to take that diploma, I didn't hear the crowd. I only heard a whisper in my head. The voice of a 16-year-old girl abandoned in the heat of Crest Hill. You did it, Elena, I said to myself. You survived. From forgotten girl to self-made force after graduation, I moved to Jacksonville and started at a small real estate firm. Nothing glamorous. I was the rookie who got the jobs no one wanted. Scrubbing model homes, organizing permits, cold calling clients who mostly hung up. But I watched. I listened. I learned. I saw how trust was built and how it could be shattered in seconds. 3 years in, I'd saved every cent I could. I picked up side gigs, freelanced, skipped outings. I didn't have the luxury of safety nets. Then one night, sitting at a diner booth with a laptop full of half-baked plans, I took the risk. I walked into a local credit union with my hands shaking and walked out with a loan. Not much, but enough. I combined it with every dollar I had and launched my own company. Stone River Urban Development. Simple name. No trace of the family I came from. The beginning was brutal. At one point, I had just $91 left in my account and a contract that collapsed the night before signing. But I refused to quit. I learned to negotiate like my life depended on it because it did. I pitched ideas until my voice gave out. I turned empty lots into homes with my bare hands and relentless will. Brick by brick, it started growing. I hired my first employee, then 3. I brought in a lawyer, ironically, one who once rejected me in my first year. And when I finally bought back the same office building that belonged to the firm that never took me seriously, I didn't cry. I just smiled, because nothing was permanent. Not failure, not shame. By 29, Stone River crossed 8 figures in annual revenue. One morning, I stood on the 12th floor balcony of our new Orlando headquarters, looking out over a city I used to dream about from a cafe window. I had once been a girl left behind in a sunburned parking lot with no suitcase and no goodbye. Now, hundreds of people called me boss. But even in that moment of success, I knew the past doesn't die. It waits. And one day it knocks. The knock I knew would come 20 years. That's how long it had been since they left me. 2 decades of silence. 2 decades of pretending they no longer existed. Until the day my phone rang. I was standing in the glass-walled office of Stone River HQ, 17th floor, looking down at the hum of downtown Orlando. Everything I'd built stood beneath my feet. Contracts, buildings, lives shaped by what I survived. The screen lit up. Vivian. My sister, a name I hadn't seen since childhood. I let it ring once, twice. Then I picked up Elena. Her voice was shaky, like it had been dragged through years of regret. I didn't say anything. I saw your company online. Are you doing okay? I let out a dry laugh. That's your opener? After 20 years. She was quiet, then finally said it. No small talk. No sube. They're in trouble. Mom and Dad. It's bad. I felt the heat rise in my chest. But it wasn't warmth. It was something boiling. Trouble. I said slowly, like how they left a 16-year-old in the middle of nowhere with a vending machine soda and a good luck text. Vivian's voice cracked. Dad lost all their money gambling. The house is gone. Mom, she barely speaks. They're not okay. I clenched the phone so hard I thought it might break. I don't owe them anything, Vivian. I'm not asking you to forgive, she said quickly. Just help. Just this once. Please. My voice was calm. Ice cold. Do you remember what they did to me? They didn't think you'd stay away, she whispered. They didn't think at all. I snapped. They never saw me as a daughter. I was their experiment, a project, a machine they built to survive. And now that it's all falling apart, they come crawling back like I'm a charity case. She was silent. Then came a sigh I knew too well. Tired. Familiar. I just wanted to keep the family together. I almost laughed. Family ended for me the day they turned the lock and left me standing in the January rain. And I hung up. I thought that would be it. But I underestimated them. Mark and Diane Holloway had one more lesson left. Only this time, it wasn't discipline. It was war. They played victim and set the world on me. 3 days later, my assistant Jenny walked into my office, her face pale like she'd seen something awful. Elena, you need to see this. She handed me an iPad. On the screen was a Facebook post from an account I hadn't thought about in years. Linda Holloway. The caption read, "Our hearts are broken. Our only daughter abandoned us in our time of need. After everything we gave, now we face illness, poverty, and loneliness alone. All we ever did was try to make her strong. And now, she's forgotten us." My stomach turned. Beneath the post were hundreds of comments. So sad. Today's kids are so selfish. She's rich now, right? How could she leave them like that? What a disgrace. Parents raise you, and this is the thanks they get. I wasn't shocked by their lies. What shocked me was how easily people believe them. Jenny cleared her throat. Some clients are asking questions. A few canceled meetings. I stared at the screen. The familiar performance. The same act they'd rehearsed all my life. Only now, the audience was the entire internet. I opened Instagram. There it was. My company's name, Stone River, tagged in post after post. Hashtags like hashtag ungrateful daughter and hashtag pale prince. I closed my eyes. My jaw clenched. They weren't just after sympathy. They were after control. They wanted to pull me back, smear my name, undo everything. They knew what they were doing. They always did. If they couldn't reach me with guilt, they'd reach the world with a story. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I could win. That Monday, Ginny walked in with more bad news. 3 major clients have paused contracts. One said, direct quote, "We don't want to be associated with someone being labeled as unfilial." I laughed. Bitter. Empty. So now we're calling a morality campaign? I walked over to the window, looked out over the city I had helped reshape. They wanted me quiet, but I'd stayed quiet for 20 years. I wasn't about to do it again. You want a story? I'll give you the truth. That night, I sat alone in my office. No lights, just the soft blue glow of my laptop screen washing over me like a silent stage light. Outside, the city moved like normal. But inside that room, everything was about to change. I opened a folder I had saved years ago, one I hoped I'd never need. Inside were photos, documents, audio files, all the things I kept, not out of hatred, but because some part of me always knew they'd come back. And when they did, I wouldn't explain myself. I'd show the truth. I posted a black and white photo of the old Crest Hill train station, the place where they left me. Just me and a vending machine. The caption was one sentence. Not everyone who gives birth to you deserves to be called family. 2 minutes later, Vivian called. I didn't answer. An hour after that, I got a text from Linda. "You've disappointed us. You owe us, Elena." I stared at those words. My fingers didn't shake. I typed slowly, every word carved from fire. The day you drove away from that parking lot, every debt was erased. Then I blocked the number. 3 days later, the second storm hit. My post exploded. Thousands of comments, DMs, shares, articles, reaction videos. Some people call me cold, heartless. Others said I was the reason the world was losing its morals. But I didn't flinch, because I wasn't done. I walked into our Monday meeting with the PR team, 2 senior managers, and our attorney. I plugged a USB into the screen, and I played it. My mother's voice, sharp and icy from a recording in 2006. If she can't find her way back, she doesn't deserve to be my daughter. The room went silent. Mike, our communications director, finally spoke. "We usually advise against responding publicly. It fuels the media." I shook my head. This isn't media. This is war. And I'm not fighting with pity. I'm fighting with facts. That night, I wrote the post myself. No vos trites. No filters. Just me. When I was 16, my parents left me at a train station. No accident. No mistake. It was a test. They didn't speak to me for 20 years. But when I became successful, they came back with lies. This is the first and last time I'll explain myself. I'm not ungrateful. I'm just surviving. I hit post, and I waited, not for approval, for the silence to break. The world finally saw me less than an hour after I posted. My phone lit up like it was on fire. Notifications, emails, DMs, missed calls, articles, screenshots. I didn't move. I didn't panic. I just sat there in that dim office, the laptop screen casting a quiet glow over my face like a spotlight. This wasn't revenge. It was a dissection. I had posted screenshots of their messages from the day they abandoned me. "Let's see how long it takes you to get home. This is a test. Don't disappoint us." I included an audio clip, my mother laughing on the phone, her voice crystal clear. "I'm done raising her. Let the world finish the job." Then I attached the guardianship paperwork from when Aunt Julia had to take legal custody of me because my parents never came back. I didn't curse. I didn't dramatize. I didn't ask for pity. I just told the truth. And for the first time in a very long time, the world listened. The first comment that made me stop scrolling came from a woman named Michelle. "I believed your parents. I'm a mother too. But after reading what you shared, I'm horrified. No one deserves that." Then came more. "I was left behind at a gas station when I was 11, just because I forgot my backpack. If you survive that kind of childhood and still build a life, you're not cold. You're a miracle. Thank you for speaking up. You're not ungrateful. You're a survivor." By noon the next day, the post had over 3 million views. News outlets picked it up. CEO speaks the truth about toxic parents and goes viral. The real story behind the ungrateful daughter narrative. I walked into the office the next morning, not as the villain of a tabloid headline, but as someone who had faced down a storm and didn't move. My team looked at me differently. They didn't say it, but I saw it in their eyes. Respect. Mike, the PR director who had warned me not to say anything, gave me a small nod. "You were right. Your timing was perfect." I glanced around the room where just days ago they told me to lay low, let the wave pass. "They wanted to paint me as the villain," I said, my voice calm. But they lost the paintbrush. The final act falls flat that night. As expected, they responded. Another video. Another performance. Mark and Linda sat in their living room. Dim lighting, carefully placed shadows, sorrowful piano music playing softly in the background. Jason's voice cracked as he looked into the camera, eyes glassy. "We never meant to hurt our daughter," he said. "We just wanted her to be strong." Linda dabbed her eyes with a tissue like she practiced it. We sacrificed everything, and now she treats us like strangers. The video lasted 2 minutes, but it didn't take that long for the internet to tear it apart. Frame by frame, comment by comment. People noticed everything. The brand new lighting fixtures behind them. The luxury throw blanket draped perfectly across the couch. The subtle way Linda looked at the camera before each line, like waiting for a cue. And then the comments started flooding in, this time not against me, but against them. This is emotional manipulation. Straight out of a movie script. I believed them at first. I don't anymore. You abandoned a child, and now want applause for suffering the consequences? This isn't parenting. This is performance art. The sympathy they once controlled was gone, replaced by anger, disgust, truth. By Friday morning, my phone rang again. It was Dominic Hayes, my investor. His tone had changed. Elena, I owe you an apology, he said. I didn't believe you from the start. I didn't soften. You don't need to apologize, I said, my voice sharp and even. But remember, silence is still a choice. And it speaks. I hung up. 15 years. 15 years of building a reputation, brick by brick, from dust and pain and nothingness. Almost wiped away by a single lie. But I didn't let them take it. This time, the story wasn't theirs to write. 3 days later, a journalist from The Atlantic reached out. The subject line read, Interview request, from abandonment to empowerment. The message was simple. We'd like to tell your story. The real one. The way you've lived it. I paused, then typed, I'm ready. But no sugarcoating. No tears. Just the truth. And I hit send. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't hiding. I wasn't surviving. I was standing fully in my own truth. And I wasn't going anywhere. They sued me for leaving. So, I took them to court. I was in the middle of reviewing floor plans for the Riverstone project, a residential complex I designed from nothing but a dream, when Jenny walked into my office again. She looked pale, paler than before. Priority delivery, she said, handing me an envelope seal with a law firm's crest. Holloway and Brooks, attorneys at law. The moment I saw the sender, I knew. I opened it slowly, like peeling back the skin of something venomous. At the top, bold and emotionless, official notice of lawsuit, filed under Pennsylvania Filial Responsibility Code, Section 7, Clause 11. I stared at the page. Then again, my parents were suing me. The same people who left me at a train station when I was 16, who hadn't sent a single letter in 20 years. They were taking me to court for not financially supporting them in their old age. I felt the rage build, not loud or explosive, just steady, like lava under skin. Jenny, I said calmly, called David. I want him in here within 30 minutes. David Rhodes, my lead attorney, sat across from me, scanning the document like it was some kind of sick joke. Technically, Elena, Florida doesn't enforce the statute, he said slowly. But if they file for temporary residency in Pennsylvania, or manage to take it federal, things could get messy. I leaned back, arms crossed, eyes focused. Messy, I repeated. They're trying to use the law to tie a rope around my neck. David nodded grimly. They don't want money. Not really. They want power. They want you back under their thumb. And if you give in once, they'll never let go. I didn't blink. Then they picked the wrong woman. That night, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Linda's voice slithered through the line like poison honey. Elena, she said sweetly, we don't need to take this to court. If you just agree to support us, we can avoid all this ugly noise. I didn't hesitate. No, her voice cracked. We're losing our house. We're out of options. You lost your dignity a long time ago, I said, each word like a blade. Then her voice shifted, dark, sharp. If you fight this, we'll go to the press. Tie your name to every headline, every hashtag. Do you really want that? I laughed. A cold, clean sound. Go ahead. Show the world what kind of parents abandon a teenager and come crawling back 20 years later like debt collectors. Then I hung up. And for the first time since they re-entered my life, I didn't feel afraid. Not even a little. If they want a legal war, they'll get one by morning. I had my legal team, my PR director, and my investor relations manager all seated around the boardroom table. On the screen, every cold, shameless line from the lawsuit. Ms. Elena Holloway has failed in her legal and moral duty to provide for her aging parents. We request financial restitution, housing, and continued monthly support. I stared at the words like they were acid dripping from paper. They abandoned me, and now they want to own me, legally. David, my lawyer, laid out the plan. We respond. Firm, public, transparent, no settlement. If we cave now, it gives them power. I nodded. Draft the full statement. Include everything, text messages, audio, guardianship files. Make it surgical. Make it undeniable. I ended the meeting with a single line. They want to weaponize the law? Then I'll show them what justice really looks like. That evening, I posted again. A photo of the lawsuit. No filters. Just cold reality. The caption read, they left me at 16. Never sent a word. never lifted a hand. Now they're suing me for not supporting them. This isn't just a legal case. It's a warning. Trauma doesn't turn into financial obligation. Psychological wounds are not contracts. The internet ignited. Activist groups reposted it. Lawyers weighed in. Child advocacy networks rallied behind me. A new hashtag emerged. Hashtag Justice for Elena. And it went viral. People shared their own stories. My parents left me with nothing, and now they expect everything. This law is outdated and abusive. Elena's not alone. Emotional neglect is still neglect. She owes them nothing. 3 days later, David sent me a message. They want to settle. I didn't even blink. No compromise. I typed back. We take it to court. Because this wasn't about money anymore. This was about every child who'd been guilt, gaslit, and abandoned, only to be dragged back when convenient. Monday morning, I was in a project meeting when Jenny burst in, breathless. Elena, Dawn Stives. You need to come now. I frowned. What's going on? It's them, she whispered. Mark and Linda. They're in the lobby, and they brought cameras. I stood calm but burning. Call security, I said, grabbing my blazer. But don't touch them. Not until I'm face to face. Because this time, I was ready to end in person. The day I faced the people who made me disappear, the elevator ride to the lobby felt like a slow descent into some forgotten war zone. Before the doors even opened, I could hear it, sobbing, shouting, the sharp snap of camera shutters. And then I stepped out. There they were, Mark and Linda, my so-called parents. Linda was sitting on the marble floor in a floral dress that was far too bright for the darkness she carried, clutching a tissue, pretending to cry. Mark stood over her, red-faced and loud, pointing. We just want to talk to our daughter, he shouted. Is that too much to ask? What kind of place is this? The security guard stood by, tense but frozen. Around them, people whispered. Filmed. A local news crew was already setting up. When Mark spotted me, his face lit up like he'd just found a match to relight his fire. Elena, he barked, so this is how you treat your own flesh and blood? Hiding behind glass towers. I didn't blink. I walked forward, calm, controlled, each step deliberate. And when I stopped in front of them, I didn't look at the cameras. I looked straight at them. You're not my parents anymore, I said, voice steady as stone. Not because I walked away, but because you did. 20 years ago, you made that choice. Linda's voice cracked as she reached out toward me. Sweetheart, I know we were strict, too strict, but we were just trying to raise you right. Now we're in trouble. We need help. Just a little. Please. I stepped back. My silence fed your lies long enough, I said. I don't help people who abandon me. I don't fund guilt campaigns. And I don't forgive manipulation. Mark snarled. You wouldn't be standing here without us. We made you. I stared at him, unflinching. No, you left me, and I made myself, with nothing but pain in my pockets and fire in my lungs. Linda sobbed louder, glancing at the cameras like she was waiting for her cue. She reached for my hand. I didn't move. I turned to security. Escort them out of the building, I said calmly. If they return, call the police. Mark lunged forward. You'll regret this, Elena. We're your blood. I didn't flinch. I turned, walked toward the elevator with every eye on me. My heels hit the tile like a war drum. And as the elevator doors closed, sealing them out of my life once and for all, I didn't feel anger. I felt clean. Finally, justice wasn't just a verdict. It was a reckoning. The lawsuit dragged on for nearly 4 months. 4 months of depositions, court filings, media statements, and old wounds yanked into the light like fresh evidence. My childhood was dissected, line by line, like a crime scene. Photos, voicemails, medical records, guardianship documents. I watched it all unfold with the kind of calm you only earn after surviving years of being erased. And then, one rainy Thursday morning, the verdict came in. I sat in the courtroom, hands clasped, no makeup, no theatrics, just truth. The judge spoke in a voice that carried no sympathy, just law. The court finds that Ms. Elena Holloway bears no financial obligation to Mark and Linda Holloway due to abandonment, long-term neglect, and a total absence of support or parental care. There is no legal tie, no duty, no debt. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just breathed. One long inhale like I'd finally surfaced after 20 years underwater. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed the sidewalk. Headlines exploded across every major outlet. Daughter wins lawsuit against parents who abandoned her at 16. Family or obligation. Elena Holloway and the fight for autonomy. Emotional abuse has a voice. And it just spoke in court. My inbox overflowed. Clients returned. Partners reinstated pause contracts. Stone River's reputation bounced back stronger than before. But more importantly, people reached out. Survivors. Adults who had been discarded, manipulated, used. And for the first time, they saw someone stand in the light and say enough. Meanwhile, Mark and Linda lost the only thing they had left, the illusion. Their home was repossessed. Their public image ruined. Sympathy? Gone. They lost the audience. And I never once said, "I told you so." Because this wasn't a performance. It was closure. One Saturday, I stood on the balcony of my apartment in downtown Orlando, watering my plants, letting the morning air brush against my face like a quiet reminder that peace doesn't have to be loud. Then my phone buzzed. Vivian. I hesitated. Answered. Elena. Her voice cracked. They've lost everything. The house is gone. Dad drinks all day now. Mom doesn't speak. I don't know what to do. There was a long pause. Can you help? She whispered. Just a little. I didn't yell. I didn't freeze. I spoke clearly. Vivian, I don't hate you. And I don't hate them. But I can't abandon myself just to save the people who abandoned me. She didn't argue. Just silence. Then a soft, broken sigh. I understand. I hung up. And I didn't feel guilt. Not this time. I felt real. I went back to the only place that ever felt like home the next day. I left the city behind. No meetings. No schedules. No phone calls. Just me and the road. I drove through long stretches of quiet country. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, just honest. And by late afternoon, I pulled up in front of a little porch tucked beneath mossy oak trees. Aunt Julia's house. The same one I ran all those years ago, wearing the weight of 16 years on my back, and no place else to go. She was sitting in her usual spot, a mug of tea in her hand, eyes closed, face turned toward the breeze like she was listening to the wind tell her stories. When she heard the car, she opened her eyes. Elena, she smiled, voice soft as sunlight. I stepped onto the porch, knelt beside her chair, and wrapped my arms around her thin, warm frame. I'm home, I whispered. She stroked my hair gently, like she did when I was too numb to cry back then. I always knew you'd come back, she said, because no matter how far we run, we all return to where we were once loved. And that was the only home I ever needed. We sat there for a long time. No words, just the breeze, the birds, and the quiet hum of peace finally earned. That night, I took her to her favorite little Mexican place, the one with the worn-out booths and mismatched chairs. She ordered 2 margaritas, one for her, one for me. Then she raised her glass. To freedom, she said, and to my girl, the one who finally learned to choose herself without asking for permission. We clinked glasses and I smiled. Not the kind of smile you force. The kind that comes when you've got nothing left to prove. Not to your past. Not to the world. Not even to yourself. Because for the first time in 20 years, I didn't feel like the abandoned child. I didn't feel like a survivor trying to justify her worth. I was just me. Whole. Free. And finally, at peace. I own nothing. Except to myself, my story isn't about vengeance. It's not about making people pay. It's about letting go of what was never mine to carry in the first place. I used to think that maybe if I became successful enough, kind enough, forgiving enough, they'd come back and say, we were wrong. You deserve better. But they never did. Because some people don't see you as a person. They see you as a project, a test, a burden to sculpt into something useful for them. So I had to stop waiting for an apology that would never come and start giving myself the love they never could. Let me say this clearly to anyone listening. Blood does not entitle someone to your soul. You're allowed to walk away, even if they raised you. Even if the world tells you you're ungrateful. Even if your own heart still aches for something gentler. You are allowed to draw a boundary and keep it. You are allowed to protect your peace like your life depends on it. Because sometimes it does. Forgiveness does not mean returning to the people who hurt you. Forgiveness can be quiet. Forgiveness can be saying, I release this, and then letting it drift away like a balloon into the sky. I no longer carry the guilt. I no longer explain myself to people who twist truth into sympathy traps. I no longer bleed for those who only ever saw me as fuel for their fire. I own my story. All of it. The silence, the shame, the strength. And I've learned that healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's a slow afternoon breeze through a quiet kitchen. Sometimes it's a 1-bedroom apartment that no one else has the key to. Sometimes it's just a full night of sleep with no bad dreams. That's what peace looks like. And now, I live in it. Not as the abandoned girl. Not as the survivor. Just as me, Elena, a woman who chose to stop proving and start living. What do you think? Should family bonds come with conditions? Do we owe loyalty to those who gave us life but never gave us love? Como budo. And don't forget to follow the channel for more true stories that hit where it hurts and heal where they need to. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you in the next one.